Thank you so very much. We will now reconvene this morning's meeting. And so, in essence, we're going to resume the public hearing. And I'm going to ask Mr. McDermott if he would please read the name of the next person we have on the list scheduled to testify.
The next member to testify is Stephanie Tipton, Chief Administrative Officer.
Thank you so very much. Good afternoon, Stephanie. Please state your name for the record and feel free to proceed with your testimony, summarize, and we'll get right into the line of questioning from members.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Council Member Parker, Council President Clark, and members of City Council. I'm Stephanie Tipton, Chief Administrative Officer. I am pleased to provide testimony on the Office of the Chief Administrative Officer's Fiscal 2023 operating budget. Joining me today are members of our executive team, including Libby Peters, Chief of Staff, Dwayne Gordon, First Deputy Chief Administrative Officer, Liana Dragoman, our Director of Strategic Design, Melissa Andre, Executive Director of the Office of Administrative Review, Val Hosendorf, Deputy HR Director, as well as Records Commissioner Jim Leonard. The Office of the Chief Administrative Officer, or CAO for short, centers our work around 4 strategic pillars: building a culture of trust, respect, and operational excellence in government, using both qualitative and quantitative data to drive decision-making, delivering transformational projects with measurable and equitable outcomes, and lastly, leaving the city better than before by strengthening administrative functions across departments. We advance these strategies through our partnership across various city departments, including the Office of Human Resources, and by supporting the departments within our portfolio, which include OIT, Procurement, and Records. Our work over FY22 reflects our investment in these areas. Specifically, we launched the Operations Transformation Fund, which invests $10 million over FY22 and FY23 to underwrite the upfront costs of departmental efforts to reimagine city processes to better serve Philadelphia residents. For our first grant cycle, we were able to support 11 projects representing 20 different departments, which focus on transforming both internal and external processes to make service delivery more efficient and equitable. In addition to the nearly $5 million financial investment, the CAO is providing ongoing technical assistance to grantees to ensure these projects will have a sustained and long-term impact on government operations. We will continue these investments in FY23 as we currently evaluate projects for the second funding cycle of the Operations Transformation Fund. Additionally, in FY22, and in collaboration with the Office of Director of Finance, as well as the project team leading our Opal project, which is a project to replace the city's legacy financial and supply chain systems, the CAO launched a vendor payment portal, which digitizes and automates the vendor invoice submission process and is part of a streamlined and user-friendly vendor payment website. Since launching in February of 2021, over 8,907 vendor invoices have been processed through the portal, resulting in 86% of these invoices being paid in 30 days or less. We also continue to support a variety of contract and procurement-related reform activities, including the implementation of Councilmember Parker's Walter P. Lomax Jr. Transparency in Business Act, launching a monthly contract resource group to provide tools and best practices to departmental contracting staff, and beginning work on redesigning and improving the usability of the city's request for proposal documents, with the goal of making it easier for vendors to respond to our contract opportunities. Lastly, we continue to advance projects and initiatives that support our workforce in a variety of ways, including leading professional development opportunities for employees like the LEAD Academy and providing training for hiring managers on effective interviewing strategies, as well as championing workplace policies like parental leave, which is now a benefit provided to all city employees. Additionally, through the work of our PHL Service Design Studio, we engaged in a multi-year project to create an equitable community engagement toolkit, which will provide city staff, community groups, and community members with resources on how city government thinks about, plans for, and facilitates equitable engagement with staff and residents. This important work has engaged over 150 stakeholders, including city staff, community-based practitioners from local community groups, and city residents in deep qualitative research that will be used to form the foundation of the toolkit. I also want to highlight the tremendous work of the Records Department, particularly in their efforts to combat deed fraud and tangled titles, much of which has been in partnership with this body and other elected officials like the Register of Wills. Records will continue this effort, including rolling out this spring and summer the first ever citywide deed fraud outreach campaign and continuing community outreach on tangled titles in partnership with the Register of Wills. Our proposed fiscal year 2023 general fund budget, which totals $14,647,948, which is an increase of about $6.9 million, reflects our continued investment in our strategic pillars. Specifically, a little over $7.9 million, or approximately 54% of our FY2023 general fund budget, will go towards funding current and future projects through the Operations Transformation Fund. Additionally, over $6,000 within our FY23 general fund budget will support a variety of new workforce initiatives within our Human Resources and Talent Division, including the salary of a Director of Professional Development who will coordinate and deliver development programs focused on building competencies for city employees and leadership to drive a culture of diversity, equity, inclusion, a new managers training series to support civil service and exempt managers in leading teams effectively, understanding leadership styles, conflict management, and communication methods, all to help cultivate a positive working relationship and to support employee productivity and morale. And lastly, we'll be relaunching the Mayor's Internship Program, which is an entry-level pipeline for college students interested in careers in city government. These new investments, in addition to our work on current and ongoing projects, continue to advance the CAO's core mission to work with city departments to transform service delivery, provide people-centered solutions, and strengthen administrative functions to better serve Philadelphia residents and employees. Mr. President, Councilwoman Parker, members of City Council joining us today, this concludes my remarks, and we're happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for that testimony. Stephanie Tipton, our Chief Administrative Officer for the city. I'm going to get us started, Stephanie, and I want to just start by doing what we should do more often, and that's saying thank you. Thank you to you and to Libby and to Erica. And if I'm forgetting someone else, and I probably am, charge it to my head and not my heart. And I'm thanking you as it relates to the Walter P. Lomax Transparency in Business Act. I did spend some time yesterday talking about the WPLT, but with procurement, so I'm not going to spend so much time on that again today, but I do want it to be said for the record. I feel this way about your department as I do about the Commerce Department, that I know the implementation of this legislation in particular, it's been a yeoman's job. And I want to thank you, everybody at your team, thanked our procurement commissioner, everyone in that department, and the law department for ensuring that it gets implemented as best as possible, and it doesn't become what I refer to as a paper tiger. I mean, you want to, irritate a legislator, pass some legislation that does absolutely nothing and is not effective. But your implementation of this is ensuring that it's not. With that being said, I want to reiterate to you the same thing I said to procurement. You need additional funding to ensure that we have the best implementation possible of this legislation. That's $100,000 in Class 200 for CAO staff, sort of to augment the work alongside OIT to develop an online disclosure portal. And this would be similar to the campaign finance disclosure portal. And then for my colleagues and even the viewing public, just like you can access anything you want. All of that information is public and readily available about campaign finance reports. Imagine if we had that kind of accessibility and we could pull back the layers and know about the firms who are benefiting from doing business with the city of Philadelphia, building wealth, their level of diversity. But in order for us to be effective in rolling it out, we've got to save that information from year to year. We need to create checklists and workflows and just create a more streamlined collection and reporting of the information, because it's currently, I would say, spread across different systems and departments. And using like a wide variety of different tools. So we want a portal that creates a one-stop shop for vendors to submit all of this information. It has to be somebody's job to do it. That's $100,000, and then $80,000 in class 100 procurement, and that will fund one position. So one, think about the portal, the technology needed. This 80,000 in class 100 for procurement to fund a position to lead on all of the disclosures. Position would be part policy, part data analyst, but would be the primary point of contact. So I want you to know I'm willing to advocate for it, and it's worth it to see this legislation implemented as best as possible. And wanted to know if you could, if you will, just note for the record, any comments about the Walter P. Lomax Transparency in Business Act and how it empowers the tools of transparency.
Sure. So thank you for advocating for that. I think we've, in partnership with your office, have been able to get to a very good place in terms of the initial implementation. I think with 6 months of implementation under 7 months under our belt, we've learned a lot of things. We've seen areas that we can improve and optimize for sure. But one thing is for certain, in order for us to make that data most useful, to make the reporting most useful, we do need to probably have it come in a little bit of a different way so it is more accessible to the public, because that is ultimately the goal of this and the goal of a lot of the disclosure requirements that we have, whether it be campaign contribution disclosures or campaign finance disclosures. We want that information to be accessible to the public so you can know more about the businesses that we're working with. So we do think that with some additional investments, some tweaks in how we might collect the data, we can really optimize, how we're presenting that data to the public, and also using that data to, inform some of the work that we're doing internally and the contract decisions that we might be making. I think you're muted, Councilwoman.
We don't want you to have to peel through. I'm talking about for members of the press and members of the public. No rights and no requests. It should not be difficult for anyone who is interested in knowing that information, who's financially building wealth from doing business with our city. We want to make that readily available. So, Stephanie, thank you for your work there. Let's pivot now over to the Operations Transformation Fund. Your proposed FY2023 budget request an almost $7 million increase over last year's budget. And it appears that a large share of that money is going to the Operations Transformation Fund. Can you briefly just discuss some of the upcoming projects? I heard you mention it briefly that this funding is going to, and then talk to us about what I would call the status of the first round of projects funded by OTF.
So in the first round of funding that we went through in the fall, we awarded about $4.7 million towards OTF projects. And that was really for projects spanning January of 2022 all the way through the end of fiscal 23, so June of 2023. We expect to spend down, probably a good portion of that in FY22, but some of the money and some of the increase that you're seeing in our FY23 budget is to sort of put money in reserve for the projects that we've already awarded. So the 11 projects that we've already, awarded funding towards, we want to make sure that they have the funding they need for next year as well. So that funding, in addition to the additional $5 million that is going to fund sort of our second cohort of projects, that really rounds out, the $10 million that we have allocated to the fund. So, like I mentioned, we went through the fall funding cycle. We have 11 different projects that we identified. You heard about one of them actually today during the HR hearing, the mobile recruitment lab. Yeah, so it's really, we're very excited about that project. But that's just one example of the projects that we're funding. We're using the funding to go towards, expanding translation for the FDILA.gov website, digitizing, police reports, making city forms, digital forms more accessible. We're even using the funding to support an apprenticeship program in OIT to help upskill our current employees to move into jobs in, UX and software engineering. So it's really going to a whole host of different projects. We are currently in the second cycle right now. So we just, we had sort of an initial intake, initial idea intake that we went through. We had about 48 ideas that came through that. We have folks who are doing pitches right now, so we whittled that group down to about 26 folks, projects that are doing actual pitches with our advisory committee. And then from there, we'll have a smaller group probably go through a more robust application, and then we'll make decisions by the end of this fiscal year, and the projects themselves will start in July. So we're really just excited about this because it's not very often that we get a chance to fund sort of innovation and transformation on a very grand scale across city departments. And so this has been really an exciting opportunity for our office to lead.
I was about to say this is a little bit different, and if you paid attention to our exchange with our Office of Human Resources, Mike Zacagney, we were talking about just the overall challenges, and you saw, I know, recent news accounts talking about the loss through attrition, like those who are retiring and who have just decided they no longer want to take the lowest salary offered by government, and they'll take their chances out in the private sector. We've got to figure out a way to make sure we've strengthened the pipeline. Listen, of any of the programs that you just talked about, have any of them actually been implemented? Are feasibility studies sort of a part of the analysis of these projects to ensure that the money to fund them is going to be available long term? And I'll give you an example. With commerce, we just talked about PHLTCB, a commercial quarter, a cleaning program. But built into that program, we were intentional about hiring a third-party independent firm to, on an annual basis, give us a cost-benefit analysis and an overall report to give us both qualitative and quantitative data to affirm the program's impact here in the city of Philadelphia. And it wasn't us evaluating ourselves, it was a third-party firm. Any role for feasibility studies and what we're building out?
I'm going to talk a little bit about what we are doing to help sort of track the performance and goals for not only the OTF as a whole, but also for the projects themselves. So we recognize that, there is, right now we're sort of early on in the implementation for some of the projects. So I think we're still, I wouldn't say that we have a lot of data to report out on, but we have about 70 individualized metrics for the first cohort of projects. And that was something that we worked very closely with all of the grantees. A big part of OTF is providing technical assistance to the grantees. So we don't want to just provide them the funding and say, good luck and here you go.
Right.
We want to actually really provide them a lot of support. And the CIO has a lot of resources internally to help them do that. So we help them develop their individualized metrics to measure sort of their performance across, the project itself to help them meet their goals. We also, in the actual support that we provide, we do quarterly check-ins with each of the projects to make sure that they're still on track. We do sort of monthly reports. They give us monthly reports on how they're doing, where things are going. We also do cohort meetings. So we bring all of the grantees and the projects together to share information with one another, to help support one another. We also have a lot of hands-on sort of services that we provide to help them, with anything from procurement to hiring. So there's a lot of very hands-on support that we provide. In addition, we also have sort of overarching metrics for the OTF that we're measuring. So, for example, things like, how many of the projects are on track with their work plans, their budgets, meeting the KPIs themselves, what efficiencies are being created by OTF projects. So we've asked all of the projects to really identify, how many dollars or time is being saved as part of what they're doing. And also, if there's increased access to certain systems, like what are we kind of seeing around that? And then, a big part of the projects that we're supporting and what we're looking at is, how many residents are being engaged, how many frontline staff are being engaged in designing the solution or rethinking the process itself. And we have put money or asked departments, fundies to put money aside to compensate residents who are, lending their time and expertise to help us with this. And then also what new processes have been instituted, with the money. So
let me ask you this for the benefit of the viewing public. She just mentioned KPIs. Those are key performance indicators, right? It's nothing more than being frustrated watching from home, Stephanie, and you're talking about metrics and how we're going to determine the success, failure, or, efficiency, effectiveness of a government program. But it's how we measure Philadelphia, whether or not investments that we are making, how well are they doing? And are they efficiently doing what we sought for them to do when we enacted them? With that being said, I'm going to turn to a tough issue, Stephanie, and I want you, to the best of your ability, if you will. We've asked this of every department, very much like we do about how does what you do help the city in its efforts to eliminate gun violence, right, and to create more opportunities. But this issue is as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Many city departments, and we just had the elimination of the Rule of Two occur in the city of Philadelphia, but many of our city departments, they continue to have low levels of MWDSBEs as it relates to employment. Tell us from your perspective, what is being done to increase the MWDSBs, their employment with the city of Philadelphia, and very specifically, what programs and policies are in place to increase these numbers? And then how much money is budgeted for FY22 and 23 for these efforts specifically?
Councilmember, are you talking specifically about employees or contractors? I just want to make sure that I understand.
We want you to talk about city departments now, so we're talking about our employees.
Sure, of course. Yeah, so I would say in FY22, the CAO provides resources primarily in the form of staffing to support DEI efforts citywide. So, for example, in FY22, our team continued to drive improvements to the vendor pay process, delays to which we know disproportionately impact minority-owned businesses. So we continue to work on disaggregating that data to ensure that we can provide more information, more robust information about the impact that is having on minority and women-owned businesses. So that's on that piece of it. As it relates to, some of the work that we're also doing with our service design studio, they continue to lead efforts on building out an equitable engagement toolkit for the city. And that's really, the goal of that is really to envision what equitable community engagement can look like for the city, particularly engagement of historically disenfranchised communities. And we think that the toolkit itself, which is going to be principles and tactics and tools and training for engagement practitioners, is really going to help support the employees and the practitioners and community-based organizations who are engaged in that type of work. And that is something that's also getting funded through the OTF. So we have about $500,000 going towards that project. And then Stephanie, I would say,
you know what I want to do here, because I just got a note with from someone saying to me, please have this information sent to us, if you will, so that we can distribute it to all members of council via the president's office, because when we are asked this question relative at large to the city, the overreaching way that your office impacts diversity, equity, and inclusion across the board in the city, I don't think people make that connection. So this is just one more layer of informing us on how the city is making investments. So that would be very helpful if you can.
Of course, I can do that. And the one thing I do want to talk about is that we are making investments specifically around our workforce too. So, I mentioned in my testimony, specifically in this fiscal year, our Human Resources and Talent Division, they led up some DEI recruitment info sessions, effective interview, strategies for hiring managers, really to help give them the resources they need to reach out and hire more diverse employees. And then, we're continuing those investments in FY23. So, for example, we have about $600,000 that's going towards.
Hopefully can you hear me, Stephanie? It looks like you froze for a second. We'll see if you come back. Thank you.
Training series, really focused on middle managers. I'm sorry. Can you hear me still?
You froze for a second.
Yep.
And to the viewing public, thank you so very much for your patience, but we can now see and hear you.
Okay, great, awesome. But about $600,000 is going to be going towards, the director of professional development, providing more training to sort of middle managers around, building effective, work relationships, cultivating sort of that culture of respect within the workplace. And then also, the mayor's internship program, which is a paid internship program. And, for us, going, shifting a few years ago to that being a paid program, I think it really helps support the diversity of the program and diversifying, the types of students that were able to participate in that program. And for us, that's really a nice exposure and pipeline for students into careers in city government. So, those are just a few of the things that we're going to be investing in next year, too.
Well, listen, I want you to finally, and this is the second to final question. I have to ask you to go back to what you mentioned about professional development. There is nothing more frustrating for the council person than during the budget hearing and talking with employees throughout the year who do a yeoman's job working for the city. They've been there for 20 years. And then someone who doesn't have any experience, however, has the academic credentials and or, have met some other requirements, and they get to come in, and then a person who's been working there ends up having to train a person who knows nothing about what you do to do a job, and you ultimately end up reporting to that person. So professional development and making sure that those opportunities are available so there is some equity and access to opportunity to move up the food chain is extremely important. I want you to talk about that investment on the record, if you will, and what that means for Philadelphia's employees.
Sure. I mean, I think our human resources and talent team has been a small and mighty team who have engaged in a lot of different ways. They lead things like our Lead Academy, which is really a professional development program for sort of emerging leaders in city government. They have done, all of our employee onboarding. So, when we have new employees that start with the city, really, making sure that we're meeting with them, we're giving them, resources and tools to understand, government and what they're going to be doing and all the important things that they need to do. And what's really exciting for me is that next year, that team is going to get more resources to really build out that capacity and really expand the training that they're able to do. And this is really in partnership with a lot of offices. So DE&I, Office of Human Resources, our ERU unit, you talked about that this morning. It's really talking about, not only providing tools to employees, but also providing them with an understanding of, where can you go when there is a problem, and who can you talk to, and that is work that we're going to be doing and investing in as well, starting in this year. So our service design studio is going to be really helping us, work out some of those. So, I think I agree. Like leadership development, professional development of our resource, our city employees is so important, and it's really heartening to me to see that there are investments being made in really expanding our capacity in human resources and talent. So we're very, very excited about that.
Liv, I don't know if you were here with us a little earlier, but I love the way you described the team. Sort of, they're like the little engine that could with the resources that they've had, and we gave Mike and Janine, Marsha, Sheila, Valerie, just the entire team, huge shouts out this morning, and I heard that from all of my colleagues talking about the important work that they do and how much more we know that they can do with the appropriate amount of funding. So thank you also for acknowledging that off the record. This is my final question, and this is in regards to that elimination of the rule of two. I did ask the same question of OHR today. Just want to hear from your perspective as I see AO4 of the city. Tell us, if you will, as we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, what is your perspective about how that elimination of the rule of two would, in essence, help the city increase the diversity of the city's workforce when it comes to entry level, but also promotions and moving up to upper management?
And I think it's a huge change, and I think Mike said it best, where it was something that I don't think he ever imagined we'd actually see a change to. I certainly didn't. So I really thank you for your leadership on that issue in particular. I think it's going to make a tremendous difference. Not only are hiring managers, departments going to have more flexibility in terms of casting a broader net for applicants, but it will allow us to reach more people on lists. And we know, HR has looked at this. We know that will increase the diversity of the applicant pool. Having been a hiring manager myself at one point in operating department, the rule of two is really challenging. When you have a need to fill a position, you want to find the best, most qualified candidate. You want to make sure that they're able to do the job, and that rule really inhibited our ability to bring on talent. And so I think the fact that we've gotten rid of that, not only is it going to help us, give us more flexibility, but it's also going to diversify, 100% is going to diversify the pool of candidates. And when you talk about promotional exams, that again is a smaller list sometimes. And so if you have the ability to interview, and in some cases you might only have 5 candidates on that list, I can now interview potentially all 5 of those candidates, whereas before I could only, interview 2. And so I think, again, for management positions, that is promotional positions, that's really important because you want to make sure that you have the best person possible for that job.
Well, thank you so very much, Stephanie, for your testimony. And I am now going to defer and recognize Councilmember Alan Dom.
Thank you, Majority Leader, and good afternoon, Stephanie. I have a couple quick questions. On the, are you involved at all in the CAMA system implementation? I think you're on mute.
On mute.
Sorry, I'm having lots of delays in my system. So my office is not directly involved in that, but our Office of Innovation and Technology is. So I know they're testifying today, so I don't know if you have specific questions about that they can probably speak to.
So let me ask you about Opal and the implementation. What is the investment cost of the Opal system that we're putting in?
Sure. So if you just give me 1 second, I'll actually pull up the budget for Opal. So Opal is essentially the replacement of the city's legacy financial and supply chain systems. So, we have a number of systems that are very, very old. and, if you've ever had an occasion to use any of them, our financial system is still like a green screen, function enabled system. And so, this has been identified as a deficiency for a while. It's something that we need to replace. And so, Opal is a project essentially to do that. So we would be replacing, things like Famous and AdPix, but also other systems like ACES, which is our contracting supply chain system. We have in the capital budget, which is where the bulk of the money is for the project, the total investment, which would be from FY20 all the way through FY27. So this is a multi-year project. It's about $93 million in capital. I don't know if I have the operating budget total right in front of me. Let's see. I'm sorry. But that is the capital budget investment that we're making. And that includes, the purchase of the software, an implementation vendor, and then also, the consulting services that we have. So we have a number of folks on board now as part of the PMO, both internal to city government and also consultants who are working on the project.
So it's a $93 million capital cost, and then there's an ongoing annual cost?
Beyond FY27, let me see if I have that. My apologies. Trying to pull it up right now.
Let me see.
Yeah, and I know OIT probably definitely has the all of the numbers. I'm sorry, I don't think I have the ongoing cost after the capital investment, but I can get that for you. We can get you the full budget.
From a schedule standpoint, are we ahead of schedule, behind schedule? Where are we on the implementation?
Sure. So we're on schedule. We are currently we're building up the project team. So we've already gone through the process of doing an RFI to purchase or identify and purchase the software that's going to support the system. So we did make that award, I guess about a month and a half ago to Workday. And so that is the system we'll be using. We are currently going through the process right now of identifying the implementation vendor or vendors that are going to work with us to implement the Workday solution. And then we're also currently hiring or sort of staffing up the team that's going to do sort of the implementation. And so there's a finance lead. So, on all of the financial system, there's going to be a lead person and a team supporting that implementation. There's going to be a supply chain lead and a team supporting that. And then also a technical lead that'll be sort of supporting the technical implementation. We've already brought on a change management lead. And so, we are kind of in the process right now of bringing on that team. I believe the goal is to have that team fully on board probably by sometime at the end of the summer is our goal.
Okay, let me ask this question. This is a big investment for the city, $93 million. And I remember when we put in One Philly, we had some operational issues with One Philly. In fact, some of my colleagues had comments about that. But what can we expect from Opal as far as operational and internal improvements from this $90-something million investment? What's going to be, when it's fully implemented, what are the benefits to the city? What is the return on that $90-something million investment?
So, right now, all of these systems are completely disparate systems, and we have a number of integrations that talk to each other. But with Opal, it'll be a full integration from, the time that we identify a thing that we need to buy all the way to the management of that thing, so invoicing and inventory management. It'll also provide us a way to integrate all of those systems. So, right now, like I said, they're disparate systems. So it'll be, we'll be able to see better returns on, things like invoicing, for example. We'll have an automated, process to invoice for vendors to invoice and get paid faster because all of these systems are going to be talking to each other. So I think we'll definitely see returns there. I think the other thing is, and this is where we're not probably as good in sort of quantifying, but it's going to be part of this, is just the transaction time, the staff time that is spent doing a lot of manual processes. So those are the types of things that will really be eliminated by the implementation of this type of system. And that allows staff to focus on more what I want to call like high value strategic type of things. So when I think about the procurement department, a lot of the transactional time that they're spending, they can spend more of their time focused on, strategic sourcing and helping to identify, vendors and working with departments in that way. So I think that there's going to be time savings and staff savings in terms of the time that they're spending doing more of these like manual rote tasks themselves.
I guess my question is, investing, was it $93 million? Are we getting a savings to our operations of $3 million, $5 million, $10 million? Is there any type of return on that investment?
I don't have an exact dollar figure, but I certainly believe that we will see a return on that investment in terms of for example, things like, the costs, that get marked up on our contracts because we are so late to pay, or it takes us time to, process transactions. Those are the types of things that I think we can start seeing an elimination of over time once we implement the system itself. I think there's other areas too, but I can certainly provide you a more fuller breakdown of that if that's helpful for you.
Yeah, normally I'm used to when you invest in technology at that level, it improves customer service, it improves delivery across the board, but it also saves money. And my question is, and if you could get back to me on this, what are the savings that we could realize from this in the way of a return on that investment?
Certainly.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. I don't know if it's Majority Leader or Council President, but I'm finished with my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman. Not sure. Any other council members that have questions for Ms. Tipton? I know we have a question for Office of Technology.
I have one more question.
Sure.
In the 5-year plan, Stephanie, you mentioned the operations transformation fund, I think, where the city workers propose, I think, relatively low-cost ideas to shift operations and improve efficiency. So what kind of long-term outcomes have we seen so far from that operations transformation fund that have been funded and implemented?
So we started providing funding in January. So we're still very early on in terms of, the types of return we're going to see. So not all of the solutions projects have really been fully implemented. But I had mentioned previously, we have worked with each of the projects, the grantees, to develop KPIs and metrics to really measure the outcomes of those projects. So there's about 70 different, individualized metrics across all of those projects. And that's how we're really going to start, how we're going to measure their success. And then in addition to that, we also have metrics for the overall operations transformation fund around, across all of the projects, what kinds of efficiencies have we seen, what kind of, cost savings have we seen, how many processes have we changed or replaced. So we're still very early on. I can't say that we have data that we can report out. The projects that we funded in the first round, those go through, in terms of implementation, the end of next fiscal year. So, for us, this is really investing in something that's going to have, outcomes probably after a lot of us are here, or impact, potentially after we're here. So
I think it's a good idea because I think the best ideas come from the people who are doing the job. So
definitely,
it's a great idea. So whatever we can do to be supportive, let us know, and let us know some of those results if you could.
We will. Yes, definitely. When we have more data to share, I will be sharing it with as many people as possible.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for all the work, and thank you, Council President.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman. Any additional questions for Ms. Tipton? Not seeing any. All right. Thank you, Ms. Tipton. Can you still kind of hang on since you...
Yep, I will.
It may need you as we talk about OIT.
Definitely.
Okay. Next up, we have the Office of Innovation and Technology. And testifying on that department is Mr. McDermott.
Mark Wheeler, Chief Information Officer.
All right. Good morning. Good afternoon, Mr. Wheeler. How are you?
Good. Good afternoon, Council President Clark.
Good. I suspect you'll have a lot more questions than Mr.
We're happy to take them today. So thank you again, Council President, and good afternoon, members of City Council. I'm Mark Wheeler, the Chief Information Officer. Joining me today to respond to your questions will be Sandra Carter, Chief Operating Officer, Steve Robertson, our Chief of Staff, and Chris Donato, our Chief Financial Officer. I'm pleased to provide you testimony on the Office of Innovation and Technology's Fiscal Year 2023 operating budget. The proposed FY23 general fund budget totals $116,730,793. That is a decrease of $4.7 million over FY22, and that's primarily due to the cost of radio replacements for public safety operations that we worked on a mid-year transfer with the budget office and placed that in FY22. So we've started planning for that work, and the budget office took that amount from our FY23. And then there are some increases in Class 100 positions. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the entire staff of OIT for their continued commitment and hard work during another extremely challenging year. There are successes that the OIT team members have achieved, but those don't often get the attention deserved for the net positive impact those solutions have had on service delivery in the city and the security of our data and information systems and on public safety. And I just want to briefly note one example of that, which is the Philadelphia Public Safety Building, which now has been designed with a highly resilient, state-of-the-art IT infrastructure that was built out by OIT with partners at Public Property and our vendors MCP, Schrader, Motorola, Dell, VMware, Comcast, Verizon, and Crown Castle. So we've had quite a group supporting us with that highly forward-thinking IT infrastructure with multiple redundancies in power, in telecommunications, and network connectivity. And primarily, it's going to be the first joint E911 call center for the city. And that design is intended to bring the highest levels of E911 operations for the city's residents and our businesses. So I think the city should be proud of the operational state of the PPBS when it comes to technology readiness and resilience. And I'd like to thank the CAO and the administration and city council members for their support of OIT. I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony. Let's have a couple of questions. I'm going to start out with a question that I'm frequently asked about, and I believe that your department, at least some have said that your department has something to do with this. A couple of years ago, maybe 3-4 years ago, Councilwoman Winona Sanchez and myself and a number of individuals, we stood out up in Venango Street, up in Lower Tioga, and we were unveiling these cameras that were for purposes of identifying individuals that were short dumping. And we were quite excited about it, and big brouhaha, got a lot of fanfare, and the people in the neighborhood were excited. But this whole issue with respects to short dumping is really out of control, for lack of a better term. So when I asked, and I'm not going to get into the specifics, but I asked about why we have not moved these cameras around, because the whole issue around it was the flexibility of the cameras. We know you identify a dump site, you catch a couple of people, they're going to dump somewhere else, right? And I was told that the inability to move these cameras around the multiple locations to be able to track this issue as it relates to short dumping had to do with OIT. Is that real? And if it is real, tell me about what we're doing to correct that.
Thank you for the question, Council President. I believe that those were, if I'm correct, that those were the cameras that were not only positioned at places that were frequent to dumping, but we may have also been investigating use of some AI there. Is that also, we were training some machine learning to help us, like, in the criminal investigation part of it. But if maybe it's all okay.
I mean,
maybe just
no, they said that was also going to be
okay.
the application. But
I'm
at that point, because we picked a location where there's like mounds and mounds of trash dumped all the time.
well, I think that part of the issue is that in the locations, if I'm correct, and I'll go back and speak with my colleagues at the streets department about this, that we did not have either the city fiber to connect to the network, or there had to be a significant amount of make-ready work to get cameras in those locations. So there may not be commercially available fiber where we connect to either a Comcast or a Verizon. And as you know, we use Comcast primarily to augment our city network, and we lease the capacity and the connectivity from Comcast. So if there's not wiring there, it has to be trenched to be brought in. That may be presenting some of the difficulty. When we looked at using Wi-Fi enabled devices, you have to have a good line of sight. So that's going back a few years now that there's been changes both in Comcast network and in the technology. It's probably, it is worth revisiting how we could use some of the Wi-Fi availability in the city, but that would have to be investigated. And similar to what the same issues we have with the video surveillance program with the police, that there are places that they'll want cameras and it takes a while to either get the trenching or get the cabling from above or aerial wiring to those sites. So there may be some complications that we have to work through with vendors, and it would take a little bit longer to do. I'd like to go back to the streets department and speak to them about the exact issues.
Okay, so it sounds like to me that we had an event and we told people in the community, because they were there, that these were going to be able to be moved to various locations. I would assume that prior to us putting the money in place, because the city council approved the budget to purchase these cameras. As a matter of fact, some of us, I think, actually used some of our ITEF money because we were in need of those cameras in these various locations. And we were told that we had the capability. So here we are years later, and you're saying that we may not have had the capability. And if we didn't, I'm trying to understand why we seem to be like not knowing this like years later. Like why?
Well, not knowing where the exact locations are, I'm hypothesizing about what the complications or the challenges might be, and those are typical challenges with the placements of any cameras that we need high availability and network reliability. So I would definitely want to talk to streets about where those were positioned, and based on those locations, I could provide better details back to council as to why that was stymied or what the complicating factor was.
So it sounds like there's a real disconnect. I mean, if you don't know why we're having challenges with the cameras and the ability to move these cameras to these short dumping sites around the city, that's a real problem. I mean, you're talking about a disconnect between departments.
There are different networks, though. The streets have their own camera network, and then we, for police, manage the VSS network. They're not exactly they're not the same thing. So I would happy to talk to streets and find out what the challenge was on their end or our end, and get back to you, because I do understand the dumping is just a problem that we have an incredible challenge to solve.
All right. Well, again, it's clear that that's a disconnect.
Sure.
And I'm not going to keep beating you over the head with this question, but can you please find out?
Will do, sir.
What the issue is, because we had everybody and their mother out there, the mayor, everybody, and it's unfortunate that if we stood there and we gave people a sense that we were going to handle this very challenging issue, and we weren't ready to do it. That's what it sounds like, because we didn't have the capabilities that we thought we did, or even we did, and you're not aware of it, or whatever. Bottom line, it's a problem. All right. And can you get that back to us? I'm assuming tomorrow you can get word to us, like what's going on?
Yes, we can. We'll reach out to streets right now and start the conversation.
All right. One Philly. Is that corrected? That the issue with respect to, hit people at home with paychecks and all the other things, and individuals having to make up money that they thought was being taken out of their compensation, and then they were told, no, it wasn't. You got to make this money up. I mean, it's been real problematic for a lot of city employees. Is that one Philly
Yes.
issue?
I think that the One Philly team at Finance and with support from OIT, has been working through those problems with our vendor and the challenges, and we, in the last couple of years, have made a lot of strides in resolving those. And we're now looking at making some additional changes to secure a more robust support system for that. So if there's any particular issues, I'm happy to look into those and address those with the finance department. That still may be ongoing, but as far as I'm aware, there's been a number of functional changes, and those specific issues have been on the decrease, thankfully.
Okay. All right. In your testimony, you highlight general funding for a new smart city director to oversee smart city projects expected to be funded by a grant. Glad to hear that. We need somebody to oversee smart city opportunities. Can you tell me about what work this director will oversee and why the role is necessary for OIT?
The Smart City Director has been a role that we have had for going back 4 years now. We're now recruiting for a replacement. Emily Yates has left. I think in our budget, what we noted was a project manager to work on the Infrastructure Act coordination that we'll need. We're partnering with the Office of Children and Families to focus IIJA money under the broadband umbrella when that money comes available, to put that into the parks and rec systems, so we can make our recreational centers equal in the type of anchor institution that our libraries are. And we also want to work with the streets department once infrastructure money comes available. If there's projects that we can support, like the Good Roads pilot that we did with the streets, where we're using machine learning and we're using mobile sensors to gather data much more quickly than we do in just using supervisors and going out in the field and using cameras and our own visual senses. If we can bring in some of that money to optimize what we're doing and cut down on some personnel costs and redirect them to other important tasks, that's what that project manager will be working on. So the Smart Cities Director is a position that we've had. We're hiring for a replacement now. It would be a project manager specific to IIJA funding that would be coming in, the Infrastructure Act.
Okay, so we've already budgeted in prior fiscals for this position. We're just replacing this. Or we asked for
just to make to distinguish, the director is something we've had. The project manager, specific to helping us with any funds that we would get for the broadband or for smart city infrastructure, we want a project manager for that. So that is what is in the budget to hire for.
That's the new position.
That's the new position.
Additional dollars.
Yes.
All right. Okay. All right. I'm a little this whole issue with respect to this short dumping cameras. I'm somewhat perplexed. That's why I'm hesitating in terms of going to my next question. I really wish you can get a response before you leave here today, but I'm going to be patient.
But we are reaching out right now.
Yeah, this has been like an ongoing issue, and the fact that we don't know, I mean, it seems like you're not aware that this was even a problem. It's like pretty amazing. All right, I'm going to leave that alone for now. I might come back. And if you get the response before you finish testifying today, it will be helpful.
Council President, I do have a brief response on that one, that we did get some preliminary information that as I said, the camera locations that if they require fiber and back hauling to some place in the street or they require aerial wiring. Once that's set up, those cameras can't be moved around. Every time there's a new location found, you have to trench and you have to find the appropriate wiring. So these were issues that I think we're aware of, and you would just have to solve for them by knowing the number of locations and then budgeting and then establishing cameras in those locations. They weren't intended to be mobile, from my understanding.
You said they were or weren't?
They were not intended to be mobile. They are fixed cameras, like the police VSS are fixed cameras.
Are you sure the person giving you that information is the right person? I mean, that was the whole point of having the press conference. And we stood there and we talked about how we could, because people said, well, they're just going to dump somewhere else. We said we were going to be able to be mobile.
I think that this is a conversation that my counterparts in Streets and I are going to have and get a response back to you that's coordinated. My understanding at this point is that they're, as I understand it, like the VSS cameras, they were fixed in place.
All right, just operationally, it makes no sense to do cameras like that. As expensive as one camera is for short dumping. I mean, you're going to put a camera to look at one location for somebody dumping debris when the person can go around a corner and dump, and that debris won't be in the sight of the camera. That makes like no sense if somebody intended it to not be mobile. And I'm telling you, that was the press conference that they were talking about being able to be mobile. All right, I'm on. You guys need to pull it together, because this is really quite bizarre. All right, I'm gonna leave that alone. Then you'll get back as soon as you talk the street.
Yes, sir.
Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gauthier.
Thank you, Council President. Good afternoon, Mr. Wheeler. Thank you first for all of the work that you and your team do on a daily basis. My initial questions are also about cameras. It seems like security cameras and data capacity are hampering the execution of vitally important city functions like the use of drop boxes in elections and the operations of new cameras to help with monitoring illegal dumping and crime, as the Council President just talked about. First, yesterday, the city commissioners testified that there are difficulties finding cameras in West and Southwest Philadelphia that can be used for drop boxes. I believe they said there are issues with the positioning of cameras and with data retention capabilities. Can you respond to these concerns and let me know how OIT has been working to address this issue?
Yes, thank you for the question, council member. The need for cameras at the drop boxes is a new mandate from the state. So the locations which are most suitable based on equity and access for our citizens aren't necessarily locations where there's already a VSS, the video surveillance system cameras that are used by police and intended for the police purposes. So in this case, a new network needs to be set up, or we're going to have to build off of the existing VSS network. When I say build off of it, meaning using the same types of technology, same vendors, same camera systems, and then designate this all just for the Dropbox locations. That's a very big IT project undertaking. As I explained to the council president, the locations of cameras require a connection back to available networks. That's commercial networks like Verizon and Comcast, or networks set up by other vendors like Crown Castle that is in the fiber business. There is then a whole system that has to be built out to retain the imagery based on whatever the state mandate is, for whatever the length of time is needed, and then staff who know how to manage that, and then do the investigation work if there's a problem. It's an entirely new system. Right now, OIT's project management office is tasked with supporting the city commissioners on the poll books, these new digital poll books. That is a significant PMing effort. And in my view as chief information officer, the teams are stretched very, very thin on these major IT projects. And to take on another one and to do it well, I think is some of the issue that we're having. And many of the conversations that you've already had with departments already about staffing leads into this capacity issue of, can we even bring people on to do this? Can we even find the vendors who have the capacity to do the work? So I just want to bottom line this to say it's a significant IT project. It needs planning. It needs a budget to be paid for, and it has an operational budget that has to be maintained. None of those things have really been built out, as far as I understand it, by the city commissioners. I'm aware of the problem. We are trying to solve for it and put them in conversations with some of our camera vendors, Comcast, so we can really understand the problem. But we need to designate a true soup to nuts project management operation out of this. And city commissioners doesn't have the capacity, and right now OIT does not either.
So are you saying that city commissioners, who is driving the train on this project?
This is a mandate by the state for elections, so this does fall to the city commissioners.
Okay. Is there any new funding in this budget to cover your part of the project?
We don't have a part in the project because it's a mandate. I don't want to be argumentative, but the state said you need to do this as part of elections, and it caught us off guard. So we don't have the budget for this. So the cameras, the project management, the installation, the management of the system, I don't have any numbers on what that would require yet.
Okay. Moving on, I understand there's a data capacity issue that is preventing the city from putting new cameras online for certain functions like monitoring for illegal dumping. For example, over a year ago, I allocated some of my ITEF dollars to the purchase of surveillance cameras for monitoring illegal dumpings at sites where, this habitually happens. 1 year later, the cameras are not running due to a data capacity issue. Can you explain what the issue is, how OIT is working to solve it, and when the problem will be solved?
Councilmember, I will have to look into this. I'm not aware of a data capacity problem with the VSS system itself. I would have to check with the team at police that manages that operation. We do support the renewals on the technology, and I'm just not aware of this, so I'll have to look into it.
Okay, that's interesting. I've spoken to Streets many times about this, and, they spoke with great specificity numerous times that there was some kind of data capacity issue that falls to your shop. They even said that we had capacity for 900 cameras and we need to go up to 2,000, but I wanted you to talk about that on record. So it's interesting that they are so affirmative about it, but you don't know about it because it seems like it would be it seems like a big deal.
I think the illegal dumping and tracking that is a big deal. What I'm trying to make clear is that we work with police to set up cameras where they ask us to. We're not in the mission, and it's not under OIT's purview to say where the cameras can go, and we just work on the operational side. I am taken a little aback by the number of times that illegal dumping has come up, because under our operation for VSS, it is for the police operations, and I am not aware that there had been so many cameras diverted towards an illegal dumping program. So I will have to talk to my counterparts at Streets to understand if this is being led by police, if they're coordinating with police, or is this something that's just on their network, which is separate from any of the work OIT does. I'm sorry that it is complicated. And I know that this is a very big issue for the city, and I will look into this.
Okay. I've been pushing on this for a year. The last 3 times I've asked Streets about this, they said it was a capacity issue that was in your wheelhouse. But thank you.
Okay.
Councilwoman, you done?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, okay. It's added to the bizarre nature of this whole issue around short dumping cameras. Okay. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Parker.
Thank you, Mr. President. and to Mark, let me start the way I normally do, and that's with thanking members of your department who I've worked with: Nate Thomas, Anthony Rosado, Cliff Weldon, Khalil Crow, Sherry Leak, for all of their help. But I'm extremely biased with Sarah Hall and Brianna Morgan, who I've gotten to know because they've helped us as we work to implement the Walter P. Lomax Transparency in Business Act legislation and those systems that I just talked with Procurement about yesterday, and our CAO Stephanie Tipton today. So thank you all for your help. Mark, I'm going to go back, and I've got to follow Council President Clark and Council Member Gaultier, and because this is this role of cameras, they play a significant role in so many areas in what we're trying to do here in the city. And I want to give you a quote because I want you to help me, because I've got to go explain what I've said to people and give them an accurate answer. In the Philadelphia Neighborhood Safety and Community Policing Plan that was unveiled a few weeks ago, this is what I state. We must increase funding to the police department for their security camera program. That's one, police security camera program. To the Commerce Department for their business camera program, second program, cameras, commerce. And to the Streets Department for their cameras to catch and penalize trash dumpers. All of these programs should be funded to at least their pre-pandemic levels and even adjusted for inflation. Additionally, an analysis must be performed to quantify how much it will cost to ensure. Listen to this. You heard the council president talked about what we were under the impression was that the cameras would be mobile, but he talked about mobility. I go in to say this cost analysis should be conducted to perform how much it would cost to ensure that people are actively monitoring the cameras or at least able to review the footage in a timely manner. So for the members of the public who are viewing at home, who listen to Council President Clark, listen to Council Member Gaultier, my question is this. Does OIT do all of the installation of cameras, listen, for police, for commerce, and for the streets department? And I got a little bit of an answer when you talked about the dynamics between the streets cameras and those that were on. I think you described it as the VSS network with the police department. So answer that question first. Do you install police cameras, commerce, and or streets? Explain that role.
We support the video surveillance system that was set up for police, which we get $630,000 in operating budgets for the cameras, the camera package, the wiring, and to do the installation and to maintain those cameras. Those are used by police for investigations of crimes. Commerce contributes money to that VSS program and coordinates with police to set up cameras in commercial corridors as part of deterrent as well as crime investigation work. So
Stop, Mark. Stop for
yes,
me.
Sir.
Stop
yes,
for
ma'am.
me.
Sorry.
For the public. They're like me. They're technical dinosaurs, right? You described the VSS network used by the police department to investigate crime. You talked about wiring, so that's one, this VSS network. And then you say commerce then makes an investment for cameras into that same network along commercial corridors. Am I clear?
Yes, that is correct. Commerce and police coordinate on where those VSS cameras should go that serve both a police and a commercial corridor safety concern.
So both of those are public safety, one business corridor and the other overall police department. The only role you have in the cameras that are much needed, and I appreciated Councilwoman Gaultier talking about dollars from her district's ITEF funding. If you talk to every district council person, we've all, because of this problem with illegal dumping in neighborhoods across the city, have invested dollars to get cameras strategically placed in areas where we have a high volume. And to not be able to have those cameras to be mobile is a little confusing to me. But the only role that you have as it relates to those streets department cameras, or the installation of them is what?
I don't have, or OIT does not have a role outside of the VSS system.
So outside of the technical system that the police and the commerce department plug into, you have nothing to do with that, and all of that work from streets as it relates to installing cameras to help us deal with illegal dumping is done by streets department staff or an external vendor.
If it's on, yes, if it's for streets and led by streets or a vendor, the answer would be yes. Streets maintains their own camera system and monitoring. When I was speaking to Council Member Goutier, my impression is that some of the police video surveillance, the VSS, was being used for illegal dumping. I would need to confirm if that's the case, if now there's some type of blending of streets system cameras and VSS police cameras to solve for the short dumping problem. If that makes sense. There may be, I'm not sure if both systems are now being used for that or not.
Well, and listen, I want you to know I respect what you just said, and I appreciate it. But if we're talking about a strategic investment that has an impact overall, not just with dumping, but with neighborhood safety, I don't care if we're talking about community policing, because that dumping impacts public safety. Right?
Yes.
Overall in neighborhoods, we know a brighter community that's well lit, where we don't see trash. All of that is a part of our strategy to fight crime and to keep neighborhoods safe. So I too would appreciate a response to that. I also want you to tell me this as it relates to, because my question was this, it was going to be about staffing, right? Because it doesn't seem like we can get enough of the cameras up and installed quickly enough. I'm talking about as it relates to demand. So tell me about the staffing needed for such an installation, and any other management or maintenance that may be related to our existing cameras that we have. What is that like? How much does that cost to install, the management, and then ongoing maintenance? And who's watching those cameras in real time? Because I remember, and I can't remember the story, cameras being put up, people thinking that they were connected into, now I know it's technically called VSS, they were connected into the police system, and nobody's monitoring the shop. I'm thinking about 5th Street. Somebody defaced the George Floyd mural that we had out there. There was a camera, and nobody was monitoring the camera. We got no data from it. So help me with that, if you will.
Sure. I will also ask Sandra Carter, Chief Operating Officer, for whom our OIT team that does the installation of the VSS cameras, to chime in here. What I can tell you from my perspective is that we use Class 100 to fund a team of 7 individuals, one being a supervisor. That's roughly $415,000 that we spend per year in that. $213,000 is also spent on the equipment. There is a camera bundle that has the camera equipment and some of the necessary wiring that needs to attach to a pole. And that is something that we can maintain and swap out if those cameras fail. And there is an additional cost, though, as I was describing to Council President, for what we would call make-ready work. For the site that has to house the camera, is the pole stable? Is there the available electric connection? Is there the available network connection? And does any of that have to be installed? And do we have to work with Pico or other partners to get that done?
So and this is, but the bell is rung. I've got to respect the time other members have questions. Your FYI budget allocates more than $5 million more, right, towards Class 100. Tell us how much of that wage increase is going to the new hiring of employees, and how much for raises, like for current employees. Are we talking about new folks, or is this raises for others?
Thank you, Council Member. Chris Donato, would you have any details there, or do we need to reflect back on our numbers and give the Council Member a response later?
Hi, Chris Donato from OIT. That funding mostly is for new positions, correct?
You know how many?
Not off the top of my head, but I definitely could get you that, within a day.
Thank you so very much. And Mr. President, thank you for the leeway you just provided, sir.
Absolutely, Councilwoman. Next up, I think we have Councilwoman Gilmore Richardson.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Council President. And thank you, Mr. Wheeler, for your department's work and testimony and for the meetings we've had throughout the year regarding a few issues that we have discussed, particularly around interfacing interdepartmentally with our OIT systems and ensuring that information is readily available. And I know movement has been made in that regard. I wanted to first circle back to this conversation around short dumping because it's a challenge and an issue all across the city and something that we've been working with not only the streets department, but with CLIP very, very closely in a variety of neighborhoods. And my concern is I want to hone in specifically on the Fairmount Park area because it has really been a challenge around short dumping over these last couple of months. And I'll particularly talk about the areas that are off of Belmont Avenue. There's another area when you're soon to enter off of Ford Road to go towards the Strawberry Mansion Bridge. And that's where I've seen most of it. And it's really been bad. And so what I wanted to ask about was OIT's capability to set up cameras around the short dumping in the park system. And the reason why I ask is because I just sent a letter to the administration today after having a meeting about a week or two ago with one of the districts in the police department regarding police radios not being able to work in certain areas. And so I wanted to talk about how you are able to establish a camera network in the Fairmount Park system.
Thank you, Councilmember Gilmore Richardson. When it comes to the use of the VSS system, we put cameras where police direct us to. So if the police are involved in the investigation, I think there is a environmental crimes unit that is involved in this illegal dumping. If they were to direct OIT through the process that we have, we would install the cameras and do the correct make-ready work in Fairmount Park, and likely work with our partners at Parks and Rec because it's under their management, and work with PICO and others. So I'd be happy to go to them and understand, as I stated earlier, if the VSS program is being directed in this way for the illegal dumping, and then how OIT, whether through more staffing or through work with our vendors or PICO, to make sure that we can get these cameras up faster and reprioritize where we are being directed to do the work in that conversation, and would be happy to do that. I also think that this problem with illegal dumping and being able to respond quickly is one of those programs or that is ripe for our Smart City PHL, where we can partner with technologists who are working with optical sensors and are working with machine learning, and how that could help us respond more quickly. Could it identify as soon as it happens and spot license plates?
Sure.
Get us the relevant information to that environmental investigations unit so they could act even faster, or give information to the community group so they could respond. I'm not saying it should be their burden, but I'm just proposing that there could be ways to make this fast data available to others to react, if that makes sense. And we'd be more than happy, to look at some type of pilot. And I think there are many solution providers out there that would like to partner on this and develop something that's workable and scalable for the city. But I definitely want to make it clear that we're going to get this question about how OIT and streets and police are all should be working, together on solving the illegal dumping problem with cameras.
No, for sure. And I'll be honest with you. I've been listening to the testimony this afternoon, and, I am just floored that Emily is no longer with us, because I was working with Emily very closely around the Smart City PHL initiative, particularly around circular PHL. And we had a meeting just this past January regarding that program and the initiative and sort of where we are with the different phases and the implementation strategy for, the later part of this year. And so I was completely shocked when I heard you say that Emily is no longer with us. And so I just quickly wanted to ask you relative to that position, whether or not the Smart City Director would still be reporting directly up into executive leadership.
Yes, that is not going to change, and I thank you for recognizing Emily's work. In a sense, we haven't lost her. She's going to be working I don't know if it's been publicly announced yet, so this is Emily's story to tell, but she's going to be working with an agency very close to all of us in an executive position. So she's going to be in the city and in a role that will contribute to the issues that you're concerned about with the circular economy and sustainability. And so that role is open. We're currently hiring for it. If anyone's watching and they're interested in joining the city, this is probably one of the most interesting and mission-driven of positions. Emily had a very small budget, and took that amount of money, like under $200,000, and brought in another $600,000 worth of in-kind contributions from solution providers and grant money. So it's a position that
I'm sorry to cut you off because I know the bell's going to ring, but Emily did a lot with a little, and she maximized the funding she had to leverage opportunities 100%. For the city. And that's what we need. We need someone who's a visionary who can really help us with this particular pilot. I just don't know that we'll be able to, continue with the same timeline that we had based on her departure. But I'm hopeful that you all would just at least update the briefing memo that she gave me so that I can understand what the timeline will look like moving forward and if there are any changes to the timeline. Because I have this document right up on my phone right now. I have been working with her very, very closely, and I just wanted to know if the timeline would change in any way because of her departure. And so quickly, I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions that I have for the record. Last year we had talked about the diversity in the IT program and how the program was geared towards your staff and not School District of Philadelphia students. And you remember we talked about working to create a workforce pipeline for young people in the school district and OIT, because when I look on the city's website, there's always openings in your department. So can you provide us an update on the progress of the program, and do you foresee opening up this opportunity to school district students, particularly for the entry-level positions? And can you provide us with any details on other recommendations you have put forth directly to the school district regarding the creation of the workforce development pipeline program in IT, particularly now that we have the new superintendent who's on the way?
Thank you, Council Member. We, like all departments, have been challenged with hiring. When it comes to bringing students from the school district on, we're more. I understand that there is a technology program and training that they can go through. We would be happy to take on students at those entry-level positions and skill them up. That's typically what we have been doing inside of OIT. We have a new IT command center that is a new group that we stood up so we could do faster response on major outages and incidences where systems were down and not working, and we can coordinate efforts. Most of those staff members have been skilled up from entry-level positions. We would also work with the community college to bring in students that have a basic IT understanding and add them to the staff. One of the other things that we've done on the diversity inclusion side is to look at staff inside city government itself, folks who have the will, the desire, and some of the aptitude to learn an entirely new IT skill. They can come from anywhere in city government. We've set up a pilot in the software engineering and the user experience programs. We've got 4 individuals that we just brought on at the beginning of the year. The Operations Transformation Fund is paying for their boot camps. These are professional boot camps. One of them is with Launch Code, the local Philly Launch Code program, getting them the skills we need for them to walk in the door, and then through mentorship on those 2 teams, led by their directors, Sarah Hall and Dan Lopez, they're going to get the type of one-on-one attention to make them like intermediary level software developers and UX designers as fast as we can. And we think that's a much more cost-effective way to get work done, but also it upskills our people, and we can be very intentional about recruiting for women and people of color in those roles, because one of the things that I think OIT does well is that we do have a very good representation of who Philly is within our departments, both at leadership levels with directors and team managers, as well as members of the teams. So I'm happy with the new superintendent coming on board as part of our digital equity work, to talk about a tighter integration and pipeline with them, with the new entry level staff. We don't does it
line with the taxi.
The police department and their cameras that are utilized to investigate crime, the Commerce Department cameras on commercial quarters to help with public safety are all plugged into what you kept calling the VSS system, and that's the video surveillance system, correct?
correct?
But when I talk about streets department cameras, I'm referring to something that we've heard called the Genetec system. Is the Genetec system the system that police, commerce, and streets department cameras, all of our city cameras, are part of the Genetec system? And isn't that our video surveillance system, or did I miss something, Mark?
Genetec is the system for recording the images coming from the cameras that we do use on the video surveillance system. It may be also used by streets as their system as well. That is the verification I need to make in the conversation.
Okay, it is.
My guess is yes.
I just want to affirm for you, for the record, that I have communicated directly with my staff. We went back through notes. We've contacted the folks who we worked with in the streets department. And while the VSS term, that video surveillance system term that you kept employing, I hadn't heard that used as much, but this term Genetech system, I heard that quite often. And then I heard that that is the one system that police, commerce, and streets, all of our cameras are on that same system. So now that we know that the streets department cameras are a part of that same system, would they all operate the same?
It is, council member, I did get a confirmation that streets and police, or OIT, are using Genetech for our image storage. I would have to look into whether we're sharing the same storage capacity or they're separate. I just would need to get those details from the teams that are directly involved there.
Okay, does
that answer your question?
No, listen, Mark, you just hit it. And if Councilmember Gaultier is listening, you saw the council president look a little like it was mind-boggling, right? Listening to the response, then Councilwoman Gaultier begins to talk about data and storage capacity, and then your response to us, and I come with the same thing, and your response was basically, look, our video surveillance system is like police and commerce, not connected really with streets. And then we're like, wait a minute, because we're told something totally different, that it's all a part of that same Genetech system. Now, what I've just learned from your response is that what Councilmember Gaultier has said was the information she got from the streets department about data storage capacity, that could, in essence, be the challenge here, because you have acknowledged that you are all using the same system to record images on video surveillance. The issue is about the capacity to store the data. So that goes back to the response that she said that she received from streets. And I don't profess, Mark, to know your job or be the most technically savvy person in the world, but the messaging that we've all gotten, because the demand from the public for these cameras across the board as it relates to neighborhood public safety, it has been one of the #1 priorities. So I'm going to, I know with callbacks, and I'm just going to humbly recommend this, because I'm going to ask for it in particular, that streets along with OIT come back together, or, to address follow-up on this issue when the two of you have been able to communicate, and then we have a clear message with the both of you on board, along with police, along with commerce, all three entities that we rely on for three different, not systems, but cameras that serve different roles, but we rely on them, and they're all on that Genetech system. So just thank you so much. I couldn't put this one down because it was the opposite of everything that we had heard, that we had told members of the public. So thank you so much for your patience in responding, and I'm going to look forward to you all getting together during a callback too, so that we can have a unified response into what the messaging is. Council President Clark, thank you so very much, sir. I had to get an answer to it, because that whole systems piece, it wasn't what we just communicated at a town meeting up in Longcrest not long ago about this same issue. So thank you, Mr. President, for the leeway you just provided.
Thank you, Council Lady. Mr. Wheeler, you had something?
No, I wanted to say that, I apologize for not having the answers that you need here, and not having the visibility down into the level of work that the cameras, the need for the cameras are, and how we're working, how this is all working together. The Genetech system, as my staff has been telling me through messaging, is used equally for the police cameras and for the streets short dumping cameras. So if there has been a data capacity issue, I'm definitely going to talk to streets, and we're going to sort through that. I'm also being told that there's an upgrade that's happening next week on Genetech, so they may have had to pause recently on either adding capacity or on adding some type of storage. That I'm just postulating, because sometimes upgrades do require you to stop any types of changes or additions and keep things at a status quo. So then you move you can do your upgrade as easily, as effective as possible without creating disruptions. So I'm joint response back to you on the state of the system and who's responsible for what and how the coordination is working to solve for the short dumping problems.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. That seems to have concluded the questions by members for these witnesses. There being no one else to testify, no additional questions. The committee will stand in recess until Tuesday, April 26th at 10 a.m., at which time we will reconvene on Microsoft Teams. Thank you all very much, and we'll be talking to you all later. Thank you.
Thank you, CP.
Bye-bye.